This is Cold Start.
You know, I was kind of wondering, do you even own your car?
What do you mean by that?
Or does your car own you? I mean, not in the sort of enthusiast way like we get caught up in the activity and we're just so deep in our cars we can't think about anything else, but literally the ownership of your vehicle. Like you went and bought a thing and you had to get the title and the registration and they make you jump through all these hoops to take your legal certification of the car, but what does it mean that you actually own it? What are you allowed to do? What are you not allowed to do?
What made you think of this?
So there's this auto consortium called Stellantis, which formed a few years back. And they're a consortium of the old Fiat Chrysler and this hodgepodge of a bunch of like French and European auto manufacturers like Opel and Vauxhall and Citroën and Peugeot. And they're all now a big group. They also own Dodge, Jeep, Fiat, Maserati. I mean, they're just a huge brand. And it turns out in their cars, they have started pushing pop-up ads to the center screen in the vehicle. Like literally an ad that can't be skipped. Do cars need ad blockers now? What's going on?
That's pretty crazy to think about of like you're trying to drive and use your infotainment system in the center console of your car and you have to exit out of block up ads. Like what were they sending?
It was updates about, of all things, extending your warranty.
There's no way.
We've
been trying to reach you about your extended warranty.
Yeah, your car is trying to reach you about its warranty. They're trying to upsell you. So you've bought this thing. In order to get rolling in the morning, you know, you getting in your car, there's a screen that pops up that's telling you, we want to sell you more stuff. And you can't go until you X out of this ad.
That's funny that they would even start trying to push things through the screen. I mean, we've become so used to nowadays, we're surrounded by screens. And if there's a screen somewhere and you're trying to use a product, there's going to be ads. But I would have never assumed that the screen in my car would also be susceptible to advertisements.
It's one of those things where it's like a line has been crossed. And maybe it wasn't one that we defined explicitly or has been codified in any way. But I think it was this implicit agreement, like you buy your car and then it's yours. And you can take it with you and use it the way you want. And it's fully a controllable environment that you now, well, own. That's the term we use. But it's not really true if now that thing that you've purchased has other content getting sent to it that you can't control or modify or avoid in any way without following the rules or the requirements of the manufacturer who sold it to you in the first place.
Yeah, and it's weird that it's the manufacturer themselves that are sending out these messages. And it kind of leads me to believe that if the manufacturer is sending me this notification about extending the warranty on the car that I'm driving, I mean, maybe this is conspiracy theorist mentality, but like if I kept exiting out of extending my warranty, would the manufacturer all of a sudden like send some sort of bug to my car to start making it run worse of like, oh, you should have paid for the extended warranty. And now that you've exited out of it 50 times, we're going to make your car not run as well and make you wish you would have paid for it.
It was always sort of a conspiratorial joke, right? Like the 91st day of the 90-day warranties when your air conditioner breaks or whatever else it is, right?
Yeah.
But now it actually looks like there's a financial incentive for at least this manufacturer who's resorting to this kind of stuff to overcome the function of your car, to actually make it not work properly because you didn't choose to buy the warranty.
Yeah, and this really brings up this interesting discussion of the relationship nowadays of automobiles and the technology that's intertwined with them. And we've seen this progress over the decades. I mean, we think back towards, the cars from the 90s and the early 2000s that, yeah, they had some technology for the creature comforts and screens and systems, but they weren't as intrusive as they are nowadays. I mean, now it's pretty accustomed when you jump into a 2025 whatever that you have this massive iPad-like screen either in the center console that controls a lot of systems in the car, or those massive panoramic screens that are in front of you that are now replacing the instrument clusters, the speedometer, the tachometer, all the sort of sensors from the engine and the rest of the car and giving you that piece of information. And it kind of leads me to believe that there's too much engagement between the electronics of the vehicle and the mechanical side of stuff. And like you're talking about, that these manufacturers now have this control over the electronics of your vehicle, it makes me believe that down the road at some point, just like we've had that conspiracy theories about our phones, that if we don't update our phone to the new software, we download that new iOS on our iPhones, all of a sudden it starts running slowly. And the producer is forcing you to buy the updated version. I could kind of see the same thing starting to happen with vehicles of like, oh, now it's aged out 5-10 years down the line in the future. Let's just make things start working chunky inside the car and force these individuals to then go out and buy a new one.
It's not even that suspicious sounding anymore because we've had the manufacturers fully admitting that this is what they're doing, right? We're going to make your phone work a little less good because your battery's getting old, and we're going to justify that by saying the only real safe way for us to allow you to continue using the product you bought from us is for us to remove or reduce its capabilities.
Yeah.
It just doesn't make any sense. And all these screens are just rife for the companies who have delivery or targeting to them to send you information above and beyond this product that they sold you, which was originally was a car that you could use to drive places, not necessarily an entertainment center or a computer or an email terminal or whatever else, but it's sort of turned into those things. And their argument is that, well, but consumers want this. They want more entertainment in their vehicles.
Right.
They want more ability to be addressed directly or to customize or create profiles for their environment. So we're just giving them the capability to do so, right?
Yeah, I mean, I could see that argument. And the general automotive consumer, I don't think shares the same mindset that we do, right, as enthusiasts. But I also think it's because manufacturers are being lazy of putting these screens in their cars, of no longer do they need an interior design team to come up with how the instrument cluster is going to look and those gauges and how they're going to be formatted and what information do we display on the center screen. Because once you make that decision of an analog gauge, you can't modify it, customize it, or change it. So there was a lot of thought that went into designing these interiors. And same thing with the center console and the dash and how the dash was laid out and was sculpted out of leathers and rubbers and whatever materials they were made out of. Now those teams can be lazy and just be like, yeah, slap a massive screen in there. And they're outsourcing this as well. They're not developing these screens in-house. It's cheap for them. They just buy whatever OLED bent screen they can from whatever Asian manufacturer that's producing these things for cents on the dollar, and they just slap them into the car. So I think they're also being lazy and just justifying that this is what consumers want.
Not only that, they're celebrating these things as features of the car, like they're things we asked for in the first place. It's a 25-inch wide OLED screen. It's an entire dashboard-wide panoramic single pane of glass screen. I don't know anybody that ever actually asked for one of these things, but that's what they're delivering, and that's what they're calling out as features for our reasons for why you should buy this particular vehicle. Nothing about its performance, nothing about its comfort, nothing about its handling, nothing about its reliability. Just the fact that there's a giant TV in this thing.
Yeah, totally. And frankly, in the next 5 years, that TV is going to look outdated. I mean, we all know that technology advances and changes at such a rapid pace. And whenever we look back on cars from 2015, 2010, 2005, 2000, the thing that dates it the most in regards to its interior is whatever technology that was put in there at the time, right? I mean, in my 2011 E90 M3, the thing that dates the interior the most is the iDrive system, the center screen that's in the center dash. That dates the car because technology moves so quickly. And that's why E90 owners love the single hump cars, because it completely removes that navigation system and makes the interior seem more timeless. Imagine these cars with these massive screens in there in the next 5 to 10 years. They're just going to seem outdated, and I can't even imagine how that technology is going to date and time itself out. Imagine the issues with those systems. Imagine if your center screen, this lovely thing that you enjoy nowadays, in 10 years' time starts glitching out and having electronic issues. It's going to completely brick the car. I can't even imagine what the cost is going to be to replace those systems in the near future.
It's kind of ridiculous because this is something we could foresee. We can understand that when we build technology, when we build computer systems and digital systems, there is a finite life to those things. They run on protocols that get outdated. They have interoperability issues as new systems come on board. They're hard to maintain. They're not managed in the same way the mechanical parts of the car are managed. You don't take these things to your mechanic and say, help me figure out this thing with my screen. They plug it into a computer themselves, and they're getting diagnostics that were provided from the manufacturer to understand what codes or what sensor information is readable there to understand the state of their system. And it's fundamentally this shift away from a car as a physical thing and environment, this analog environment, to one that's becoming more and more digital. And there's this evolution that's occurred of digitalizing the car, where at one point in time, we decided that engine computers were going to be a good thing to help us manage timing and fuel consumption and emissions and performance. And we've used those as an attribute to increase the quality of the experience we're able to give a car. Cars perform more reliably. They're more efficient than they ever were before, in part because of the development of these ECUs and computer management systems that are in a car. But it's the point at which these start to take over and are actually taken away from our control. Things that we're not actually able to manage or modify or repair, even if they go badly. This dovetails into the conversation about the right to repair. What we're hearing about farmers in a dispute with John Deere because they could no longer manage or modify the tractors that they use to grow and do their own business, to have their own agricultural business. They can no longer get under the hood of their tractor to fix something if it goes wrong. They've got to fire up a call to John Deere, pay a subscription fee to them for customer service and support over time in order to be able to continue to do their business for something that ostensibly they paid for, they purchased outright. And in the past, they would have been able to modify any way they saw fit.
Yeah, and it's like there's this proprietary software that you have to be able to plug into that tractor, car, whatever, to be able to run the diagnostics on the car's internal software and technology. I mean, we even see this in the automotive field, especially for those enthusiasts like ourselves that like to modify cars. We love to tinker with our stuff. And more we've seen with these new modern cars, they try to make it increasingly more difficult to go into the ECU, the computer of the management of the car, the engine, all that sort of stuff, and make tweaks, right? They try to make it very, very challenging. I mean, back in the old days, back to my 97 M3, it was a little bit easier to hack into the computer of the car, and Steve Dinan was the famous one to be able to do that for BMWs for the longest time and make those modifications. And as technology has developed and progressed, manufacturers continue to make it challenging for you to do anything to your car, to the point of if they notice that you've gone into or tried to jailbreak your ECU, they'll completely brick the car in its entirety. And obviously it's going to void your extended warranty, void your warranty, all that sort of stuff. But we can easily see how this technology will continue to advance even in the automotive space where, yeah, if you want to work on your car, if it has any sort of issue, you have to go to a specialist. You have to go either back to the dealer or you have to go to a certified mechanic who has these specialized tools to be able to fix your car. Long gone are the days where you could have physical tools, wrenches, hammers, whatever, and fix your car. Now you need these specialized systems, and the manufacturer is going to hold on tight to that because they can make a bunch of money from us.
Actually, I like to watch these mechanics on YouTube, like the Car Wizard, who go out there and they work on old cars and they use those old diagnostic techniques like putting their ear up to the tool that's pressed up against the block of the car, and they're able to hear there's a vibration coming from a cylinder and they can't figure out where, and they're able to kind of suss this out, sleuth it out. No longer is that the way people diagnose vehicles that are produced today. It's all through these computerized systems. And it sort of begs the question, at what point did using computers to help us manage a car and its capabilities for the purposes of helping the car be better at being a car shift away from that to being something that was remotely controlled, connected up to a third party, the internet, the cloud, the manufacturer directly, whatever that is, in order to be given or have taken away certain capabilities of that car?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I mean, this interconnectivity of the electronics is not only creating this very strong umbilical cord to the manufacturer where you're basically at their demise when anything goes wrong with your vehicle, but they're also using this technology to monetize their consumers, monetize the people that purchase their vehicle. And maybe this seems conspiracy theorist, but it's not. It's been proven. But they use technology in your car, the cameras, the sensors, the connectivity to the internet to monitor your driving habits. Like, that's what's insane, is that when you go out and you buy a brand new car and you set up your infotainment system and you agree to all these terms and conditions, you may not recognize that you're agreeing to basically selling your data to the manufacturers, that they can then sell it to third parties like insurance companies and loan agencies of the way that you're driving the vehicle. They can monitor how hard you're hitting the brake, how hard you're accelerating, how fast you're going. They can see all of this information. They can even see inside the cabin if you're paying attention to the roadway or not. It's pretty scary stuff. And I think that's why both of us, we love older cars, just simply for the fact of it's this very simplistic relationship of, I've purchased this product, I fully own this product, and I'm not being monitored or watched by the big brother auto manufacturers. Like, why are we even talking about this in this day and age of, I can't just go out and buy a car and it's a car. It's half a appliance, and there's all these other things that go along with it that are kind of terrifying.
It's one of those things where car manufacturers saw this as a new opportunity to make money, to monetize their customers and monetize their vehicles by collecting data about those individuals and cars and then selling that data elsewhere. It's just a new revenue stream for them. And I don't know, call me a little old-fashioned, but I always thought the whole concept, the whole value proposition of ads was that it offsets the actual cost of delivering a service by giving you this information in exchange. So to watch this TV show for free, we're going to make you see something about the advertiser, the sponsor who helped to pay for it on our side of things so that we can actually deliver it to you. And there's this exchange of value that occurs in order for that ad to be consumed. And we've, by and large, agreed to that as consumers. We put up with that.
Yeah.
But in this case, you're talking about just adding an additional revenue stream on top of what's already there that has nothing to do with the core functionality of that product or service, just because they can and because they control it, because these companies lack vision or innovation or capability of developing something new that helps you have a better driving experience or overall experience as a passenger in this vehicle, other than trying to cram information down your throat that you didn't ask for, or deliver information that they could act like is some value add to you, but really has nothing to do in any way, shape, or form with the fact that you're in this vehicle. You can just as easily get that same content delivered to your iPad, to your phone, to whatever it is you might have with you inside the car. They're just trying to take over that aspect of delivery to that vehicle and add their capability of making money off of you from it.
Yeah, and you would think that, like, when you spend tens of thousands of dollars for a product, that's the end of the engagement between you and the automotive manufacturer. Like, yes, we're usually used to, if we want something for free, we know that our information gets sold on the internet. That's kind of how that functions. Or advertisements get to throw stuff at you and try to make money off of you. But when I'm paying tens of thousands of dollars for a brand new car, why am I getting ads thrown at me? And why is my information still being sold? And it's kind of this interesting shift within the automotive space of these manufacturers of how they view this relationship with their consumers and selling automobiles, selling their product. And we've also seen them completely restructure how they're making money off of their consumers beyond just selling them the hardware, just selling them the car itself. They've been stacking on this other stuff. And I mean, as the landscape of automobiles shift into more electric and electric motors, there is a new market that kind of goes with that. One of the most interesting ones that I've seen is whenever you purchase an electric vehicle, obviously it's pretty simplistic in regards to the way that it functions. You have electric batteries, you have an electric motor, but the way that manufacturers have been selling them is that you buy basically a base model, and once you've purchased that, you can opt in to pay a subscription model to gain more horsepower out of the vehicle after you've purchased it, which means the drivetrain is capable of producing more power and having more performance. But when you first purchase it, you purchase it at the baseline, and then essentially you can purchase like the S line or the performance package after the fact. and it just updates the software in the car to then produce more power. Such manufacturers as Volkswagen and Mercedes have been using this model where you can pay a monthly subscription or a one-time fee to basically get the sport package.
It's kind of ridiculous. There's a point at which you have to ask yourself, how is this any different than what I bought? I bought a thing that had a capability that you decided you're not going to turn on until I pay more money for it, and then you'll turn it on later. Well, for performance or things that are, kind of optional in the car, maybe there's an argument that can be made, like not everybody needs the ultimate performance package, or maybe there's something about using that level of performance in the car that otherwise, or should I say, is at the expense of reliability or some other efficiency of the car, so that you're making people go through an extra gate to gain advantage in a way that actually comes at a cost. But that's not what's being presented. You have manufacturers like BMW who are putting seat heating behind a paywall. That is, if you want to press a button in your car and actually have the little heater come on in your seat, if you didn't pay for that function, you're going to be pressing and nothing's going to happen.
Yeah, well, thankfully, the consumers on that front fought back against BMW. And so their subscription model for pay for heated seats or pay for options in your vehicle, at least that one's gone to the wayside. They fought back.
It's such a passive thing, though. Like the fighting consisted of people just saying, I'm not going to do that. Right? Like there wasn't actually any mobilization by consumers as a group to say like, BMW, we're very unhappy with this direction you're going. We're going to stop buying your BMW vehicles if you continue to do this. It was rather people voted with their feet and they said, yeah, we're not going to do this. And they got some bad press about it too. And I think
a lot of backlash.
They never really rolled this thing out. But at what point is it allowable or acceptable for them to go and try this again?
Yeah, or with other stuff. I think it definitely opens up the conversation of if there's this whole like you have to purchase the DLC package in your car of where does it stop? Where do the monthly subscriptions of like, oh, if you want to unlock these features of your car, you need to pay additional money, whether that's blind spot monitoring, whether it's, lane keep. We've seen it with Teslas. You have to pay an additional charge if you want the autonomy feature. There's all of these like nickel and dime extra things. And I guess I get it because from a manufacturer's perspective, they sell their generic. It's a low cost. The people that just want a cheap form of mobility in a vehicle, they'll just pay the baseline price and they're fine with not having any features. And then basically the manufacturer can then skim every single person and get them for as much money as they can for whatever additional features that they want. Where I feel like back in the day, like if you actually cared about the features that your car had, you would build it, right? Like we had the option of like you could order your car and be like, I want the cold weather package, I want the convenience package, I want these items, I don't want those things. And people actually ordered their cars. Now the issue for the manufacturer is that it's a little bit more difficult that they can't just produce a mass of the same car. And so like they're special ordering everything. And that takes more time and money to be able to do. And so now they're basically just doing it on the back end, right? We're going to produce the exact same car for everyone. And then through this additional technology, because these cars are connected to the internet, we can then just charge people after the fact of like, oh, if you want these things or that thing, all these cars have these capabilities, but you have to pay to unlock them.
I think dealers have been moving in this direction for a long time, right? Manufacturers put a set of capability in a car, and they push some of those things down to the dealership to actually have as a dealership installed option. Like they wouldn't even do it at the factory. And I think we're seeing the similar thing happening in a more commodity way with our overall supply chain. When a manufacturer produces, let's say, a inkjet printer, and it's going to be distributed out to people, very frequently what happens is that device, that printer, isn't completely fully assembled and packaged at the factory. It's sent to a third-party distribution and integration center, which is effectively a big warehouse where all the trucking is going to come from, and they do the final assembly and integration of products there. So like literally there's capabilities or functionality that might be added or subtracted, kind of like this dealer added function capability that's happening with more broad products. And in a way, it's sort of like we're training consumers. People who are just coming up today know no other way than the fact that they're getting nickel and dimed for these kind of capabilities and features. To your DLC comment, we're both old enough to remember when we'd go and we'd consume a video game. We'd go buy a video game console or a system or a CD or a cartridge or whatever format it came on that was pre-streaming. And you bought a physical thing. Music was the same way. You bought a CD or you bought a cassette tape or you bought a record. And once you physically own that thing, it was in your possession, you can use it as you saw fit. You could lend it to your friend. You could do anything but violate the law, which was copyright protections.
You couldn't burn a bunch of more CDs and try to sell them.
That's exactly right. And video games were the same way. You couldn't burn copies of that and then try to resell them. You'd be violating the law explicitly. But then what happened later on is the medium through which these media were being delivered to you, this content was being delivered to you, has changed. In music, it's become, and in video, it's become streaming. In the car, the content that you're getting down to your car is being streamed to you effectively by the manufacturer, by their third-party systems. And so this concept of this thing that you have, that you own, can be taken away from you or disabled in some way. I mean, your entire car could be bricked, remotely unlocked or locked by these third-party services that theoretically we're paying for as a safety or convenience feature, a la OnStar or things like that.
Well, imagine if a manufacturer had its ability, which it does, right? You're connected to the mothership where they can make updates and all this internet connectivity to your vehicle. But imagine if you were like leasing a car, or you had a car payment and you didn't make your car payment for that month.
Yes.
And they're like, you can no longer have access to the car. And it's like, you can no longer unlock it. You can no longer start it. Like, and I think that's what's like this overarching conversation is, like you're saying, how much do you really own the car that's in your driveway when it is connected to this mothership of the manufacturer through its technology? Because just like the video game thing, like when you used to buy a video game, you physically had that and you had the whole game. Where nowadays, whenever we buy a game, you download it through your Xbox, PlayStation, whatever it is. And in most part, you don't have the entire game because then you have to buy all the DLCs, you have to buy the extra levels, you have to do all this sort of stuff. And so the producer of that product always kind of has a hold on you and can ring you for extra money whenever it wants.
I'll say with the video game, though, video game company could say, look, we built this video game. It's this world that has these capabilities and these players, and we're going to continue to develop it. We're going to add new capability. We're going to add functions that weren't there before. We're going to give you more than what was there previously. And if you're willing to pay for that, you'll be able to have that delivered to you. And that's different than what the car manufacturers are doing because they sold you an entire and complete car that was supposed to have a set of capabilities. And then later on, they're saying, hey, if you want this additional capability, you have to pay for it. But it's the kind of thing that we used to just give you as part of the car or make an option that you physically decided or not to have installed in the car. And you either had it or you didn't. And you could go third party or do aftermarket add-ons to your car to try to replicate or approximate that kind of capability. But most of the time, it wasn't the same as having it direct from the factory. You wanted to buy it from them. And it's back to this John Deere tractor thing is once you've purchased an automobile from a manufacturer, do you actually have the full right and ownership capability of that thing anymore? And it's sounding like the answer is no. Your rights are to acquire and register and insure and maybe sell or transfer your car. But the actual use of it, the capabilities of it are no longer entirely protected by that purchase contract if we agree that things can be turned on and off remotely, including the car itself, functionality within the car. New features can be added over the air just because somebody's paid for it when there's no physical difference in the device, in the car, in the platform that the person is using. It's all software. It's all feature bits being flipped on or off remotely by some third-party company who decides whether or not they're going to allow you to have these things for whatever price they decide to charge. So now those ads that are popping up in sort of an inconvenient way on your display in your center console, what happens when those are now on your heads-up display? What happens when you're looking out at the road and there's an ad now in your field of view for the fact that there's a McDonald's 1 mile down the road and the car manufacturer is making money from the McDonald's corporation to put that ad there, but you're gaining nothing but being incentivized or lured into going someplace you may or may not want to go for a thing you already paid for to use just to drive somewhere, not to tell you where you should go.
Yeah, no, it's totally a slippery slope. And you talking about like the heads-up display and like advertisements popping up on that, it just immediately makes me think about that scene in WALL-E when he finally gets on the ship and everyone's in their little chairs and they just have a screen in front of them.
Yeah.
And all it's doing is just like popping up ads of like, hey, we have a new smoothie in the food court, or hey, blue's the new color, whatever the case is. And like, kind of where does this stop? And I think that's the thing is like it is a slippery slope for sure. And like we've seen with many things with technology in society in general, not just in the automotive space, but the regulations or the laws, they always lag by about 5 years. It takes time. And that's the thing is like there's this openness that is allowed for like these crazy, stupid things to occur before there actually are rules and regulations that prevents it from happening. And I would go even further on your heads-up display analogy there of what happens when our cars are fully autonomous, like Teslas and stuff like that we've known that these vehicles can control themselves all the way from point A to point B without us even engaging with them. Now your windscreen, the windshield in front of you, is basically just going to be a big display for advertisements that all of these big corporations that are willing to throw money at the manufacturers are now just going to display their products. Like we've seen in every other like futuristic movie of like, oh, the consumerism will take over. I could totally see that happening.
Any pane of glass in your car is a display, potentially. That's where we're going with this.
And an advertisement space.
It reminds me of this movie from the late 80s called They Live. And it was with Roddy Piper and Keith David and had all these guys in it before they got really famous. It was about this sort of dystopian world where the government was putting all these subliminal messages out via advertising, but they weren't visible to most people. But there were these special sunglasses that if you got a pair of them, you could actually see what was being delivered. And all these billboards that just looked like they were consumer happy messages sending you, incentive to go buy a thing were actually saying like, obey or don't question authority. So now that's a little bit of the conspiratorial mind thinking. But imagine in the world where in the future, any billboard that physically exists out in the world can now be overlain by the technology in your car because looking out of the glass is just looking at a display. So now the car manufacturers are going to be competing with the physical media advertising companies who have billboards in the world because they'll just superimpose their digital ad on your interior screen over their physical ad out in the world. And oh, look, it's a new revenue source for the car manufacturers. So don't you know that they're going to do this?
It's kind of scary to think there's so much stuff in our world that is run by advertisement agencies and marketing and all that sort of stuff. And yeah, you could totally see that slippery slope. I think that's definitely like, the futuristic, just like conspiratorial mindset of like the potential downfall of all this stuff. But to get back to like what's actually happening right now and what's kind of terrifying about modern day cars and how much of their systems are controlled by the electronics, that leads to more of like a security issue. If everything in your car is run by electronics and your car is connected to the internet, there is a actual security risk in your car being taken over and being controlled.
Totally.
I mean, we've seen Teslas, you can control them with your phone, the auto summon, that sort of deal. Like the car can control itself. It is fully independent. It does not need a driver, which means if you have the ability to hack into the system that can then control or get involved in these vehicles, we saw this even back in 2015. Think about this, 10 years ago, how much cars have advanced over the last 10 years in regards to their technology. But 10 years ago, there was actually an issue with Dodge and Jeeps with the Uconnect system where hackers were actually starting to hack into these vehicles and could completely shut off the engine and control the car. I think that there's like an actual risk there. And who the hell's talking about the security of those systems that control the cars or how you can or cannot hack into them? I'm sure automotive manufacturers aren't thinking about their cybersecurity like tech companies do often think about that. Manufacturers are like, oh yeah, we're car companies. Like we don't have to think about our cybersecurity, but nowadays it's an actual risk.
That safety and security is one of those things that those same manufacturers who are taking advantage of yours will try to sell to you as a benefit of these features. The OnStar remote capability,
oh yeah,
remote lock, unlock, automatically understand if your car is disabled in some way, all presented as these things that are only good for consumers that nobody wouldn't want. Just sign here on the dotted line and pay us every month for the subscription fee. But the reality is exactly what you're saying. Car manufacturers, by and large, don't have the IT capability, the infrastructure, the knowledge of an IT security professional firm. They just don't have that expertise. They don't even have the incentive to spend the money and energy to make those things work well because they don't gain money doing that. They only lose money when things go badly. So the preventative work that they would need to do to harden their systems and make sure that they're completely impenetrable in the same way that governments, military, financial institutions and others have to spend that money to invest because the nature of their data and their systems are so critical to humanity, right? Society at large, that they have to make those investments. And if they're caught not doing that, they'll go out of business. Yet the car manufacturers are given this pass because we're just a bunch of car people. We're mechanics. We're engineers. We didn't think anything about people hacking in through the remote key fobs of your vehicles to be able to get into your car. We didn't think anything about that. And so give us a break. We shouldn't be held liable. And by the way, we didn't even do this infotainment thing well enough. We had to pass it off to third-party companies like Apple or the Android ecosystem, except in cases like where GM hasn't managed to get this right really at any step of the way. They decided they were going to do CarPlay in cars. Now they've completely gone the other way and said they're going to completely eradicate CarPlay in their cars because they've recognized there's a whole system by which they are going to lose out on gaining access to data. And they're terrified that the Googles and Apples and other companies of the world are going to somehow get more handle on the data that they could be making money off of than they. The sort of benefit that they'll provide you is, oh, well, if you agree to put this device in your car or allow this data feed to occur, well, we'll just provide that to your insurance provider and, they'll get to see what a good driver you really are and they'll reduce your rates. Where in reality, what's happening is they're measuring how hard you press the brake pedal, how hard you press down on the throttle when you accelerate. Are they modeling you against some irrelevant or made-up standard? And they're going to say you're now somehow less safe than the standard that they've defined, and they're going to charge you more money for it. Where are the controls on this system? This is a black box where they can just say you're doing anything, that they can set any standard they want and say you're in violation of it. And here you need to spend more money with us if you want to continue to get the same thing you were getting before. It's pretty insidious almost any way you look at it.
Yeah, it's totally Big Brother type stuff of just being watched at all times. And we're basically selling our information and selling away our privacy for convenience, right? It's this whole thing of, oh, I like having this screen and it has all these features. And now that my car is connected to the internet, it can auto update, and how nice that is that it can be adding features over time. And as a new model comes out and they have new features, oh, my old model can update to that. But at the end of the day, you're just selling away your privacy and you're selling away your information. And I feel like a lot of people, when they purchase a brand new car, brand new 2025 Honda, whatever, don't recognize that they're making that transaction.
But the manufacturers really have your interests in mind here. They even give you the capability to opt out of some of these things. So the result of that is you miss out on things like crash detections or remote door locking capability or getting roadside support. Well, wait a minute. Just because I don't want to give you my data all the time or buy this add-on service, you're going to take away what are effectively critical safety capabilities of these cars? Now we have to go back to this whole question about ownership, back to the John Deere tractors. What happens when you buy anything? You get a license to that thing to own it, to use it the way you want? Or is it always going to be dictated by some third party to say, look, you bought a thing, but you only bought it in this context, for this use, in this era, during this time period, and after any of that elapsed, you're done. You can't use it anymore. There isn't having an old product that's still kicking around anymore because it has been disabled for you.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy to think about. I was going to ask you, is there anything that we can do in modern day cars to prevent the manufacturers from taking our data? And it sounds like they use enough leverage of, oh yeah, you can, like the false sense of free will of,
right.
Yeah, you have an option to choose, you can opt out, but then there's all these things that you lose. And then, of course, at that point, you're like, what's agreeing to another terms and condition? Are you really going to read all of the fine print? No, whatever. And it's just interesting that, like, now auto manufacturers, like, this is the business that they're in. Like, it used to be just like they made cars, and cars used to be representative of freedom. Think about back in the old days, you turn 16, you got your license, you get behind the wheel, freedom of the open road, you're out there on your own, you can do what you want, the freedom to just drive. And that doesn't exist anymore. It's kind of crazy. Like, this interaction, this contract that you sign into nowadays in the cars and getting a brand new car is completely different. That there is no more this freedom of the open road, and not even getting into the conversation of the freedom to drive your car, and who knows in the future of all this autonomy and stuff like that of eventually just completely eliminating the human factor of being behind the wheel. It's just kind of crazy, the commoditization of automobiles and society in general.
And look, we know how this sounds, right? We have a couple of car enthusiasts that are getting really worked up over the fact that they're paywalling some features in our cars and they're trying to give us content that maybe we don't want, but other people might want. But the reality is this is a really slippery slope, and it extends into many other areas of life more than just buying and using your vehicle. Can you imagine now what's happening? The military buy a lot of gear from third parties, right? They have these defense contracts and they have helicopters made, or their vehicles that they are using, their weapons, their whatever it is. The military is a high user of contracted, outsourced private labor to help them acquire capability and tools and what they need to function. There has been a law proposed to allow a right of repair to exist for the military. It was called the National Defense Authorization Act that it got attached to in 2026. But a bunch of defense contractor lobbyists got involved and went to their Congress people and those who'd be potentially regulating and voting on this. And wouldn't you know, they managed to kill off in this proposed bill the right to repair for the military. So now what's starting to happen with John Deere and tractors and farmers, where farmers are just trying to run their business and do their agriculture and sell their product and get a reasonable price for it, but they're being told they can't modify or manage or repair their vehicles when they go bad. Can you imagine the military now being held to account by third-party companies by saying, well, sure, we know you want the update on this device that is connected to your cruise missiles, but you need to pay for this other feature and this add-on pack and do the upgrade before we'll even allow you to turn on that feature for your cruise missiles. And, oh, we don't care that you're in battle right now or there's a threat looming. This is the capability we sold to you. You have to take it the way we are saying. And granted, for the military and systems of importance to human life and safety, there will likely be regulations and laws put in place to allow that kind of stuff over time. But what we're seeing right now is we're confronting these very issues and we're failing to regulate and failing to put the kinds of laws in place that we need to protect ourselves or our important infrastructure like military systems. So if we're not going to get it right for the military, we're not going to get it right for farmers trying to grow our food, well, we can just write it off as something that a bunch of people who like cars a lot are annoyed that they're going to have to pay for their seat heating when beforehand it was something that they took for granted would automatically be in their car, or other capabilities that we can't yet foresee because they haven't been developed, but we want to be able to deliver digitally to your car or over the air, and we want to be allowed to do that without any control or constraint to us whatsoever. And right now, the landscape is such that the car manufacturers can very well do that.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy that like this little discussion that we're having of noticing within the automotive world has much larger ramifications. And this has always kind of been the pattern in regards to anything that's internet related, technology related in terms of policy making. I mean, even back way when of like, what is your right to privacy of what's on your phone and communications and stuff like that?
Right.
Does the government have the right to go into those conversations and monitor things? And nowadays, it's the same conversation, but now it's with vehicles, which we would never think that would even be an issue. I can only imagine like the dystopian future that is maybe not in the so distant future of like everyone being in their little robot pods on the roadways driving to work or being transported to work, not even driving. And then here's us, the car enthusiast outlaws that are like, I'm still going to be the human involvement. I'm going to drive my vehicles. The government can't track or monitor where I'm going because everyone else is being tracked. And like I could just see like that image of like cutting up traffic of everyone else in their little robot pods, and we're still in our old 2000 whatever Porsches and BMWs still having a good old time. And it's just, I don't know, it's kind of crazy to think. And seeing all of this stuff in the news and all the things that you're talking about and all the different things and policies that are trying to be made, it just makes me happier that I'm in something that is kind of out of this date range of I'm not being monitored by my BMW. It kind of makes me feel glad that I have an analog car. And it's funny because we always talk about analog in the sense of like the analog driving experience, putting the driver at the forefront of that experience, but also analog in the sense of my car's not connected to the internet and selling my data or tracking me.
Yeah, I think that's the ultimate difference, right? When we built capability into cars for the purposes of making them better in whatever way you want to say better is qualitatively, that was a real win. That was a win for consumers. It was a win for the manufacturers. They could charge more money for that stuff. Everybody went away happy. But then as soon as this stuff started getting out of local management, like as soon as there started being oversight from afar, where manufacturers continued to have a view in whether it's purely a data stream or an audio stream or a video stream into your car after you've purchased it, that's become de facto the standard, the thing that we've allowed to occur. And it requires a lot of effort and insight and knowledge and time spent on the part of a consumer to learn about what systems exist in a car that you want to buy, to understand if there's an alternative that you can go find a manufacturer maybe that's not doing this stuff. And then a year later, that manufacturer gets bought out by Stellantis or the equivalent of some new consortium, and now their new policy is to do exactly the thing that's the opposite of the reason that you engaged with them in the first place. So how do we take hold of this as consumers? Is there anything that can be done on the policy level? Is there anything that can be done through organization of groups together to say, we don't like the way this is going and we want to prevent it or stop it from furthering? The only thing I can really think of is coming back to that voting with your wallet, voting with your feet.
Yeah.
Get a car that doesn't have all that capability, that doesn't have those screens. If you buy one that does, don't turn it on. I had a Cadillac Blackwing CT5V for a while, and it had that OnStar thing in it. And it was already at the point at which GM was getting into trouble for collecting data on cars and selling it and being disingenuous with their consumers about what's actually happening when they approve those OK screens with all that legal text that nobody actually reads, and they're taking advantage of that fact. But I never turned on that function, and I kept getting nag emails and alerts and updates in the car from this is going to go away, and after this date, you're no longer going to have this capability. It was something I never once used in the car in the first place, and it just reminded me how much of an incentive the manufacturers have not to help keep you safe, but to make sure that they have that view, that data feed into your car so that they can make more money off of you by selling that information to insurance companies or whatever third-party data brokers have an interest in collecting stuff about your driving habits and your whereabouts. Let's not overlook that. This isn't just whether you hit the brake really hard or you slam on the throttle pedal, but where are you on this day at this time? What were you doing in this location? Who had a right to know those things? Your car company? Just because you've taken their car somewhere, why should they have the right to know where you are in that car at any point in time after you've driven off the dealer lot? Things like this are, again, part of that slippery slope and might sound a bit conspiratorially minded, but as you zoom out from these things, if you look back to a car from the 80s, what information was being sent from that car anywhere? Nothing. It would actively have to be collected from the car by physically going to the car, putting a sensor on the car, and gaining insight into information like they do with a smog check. They weren't able to do that stuff remotely. Fast forward a few years, there's a few more things we can do remotely off of the car and capabilities we can use to interact with the car that were giving us useful capability, like to be able to remotely unlock and lock your car doors with a little fob was a convenience over having to physically put the key into the slot and turn the key and whatever. Did we gain a lot from that? Maybe not. We gained some downside in the safety and security vulnerabilities that we gained, but ultimately that was a trade-off people are willing to make and were willing to pay for that additional convenience as an option on a car.
Yeah, but that was a controlled system. Like that, if I hit a button on my key fob and it unlocks my car, it's only if those are in close proximity with one another. Where like nowadays, It's even, I could send a notification on my phone or hit a button on my phone and unlock my car from 2 states away.
From anywhere in the world.
Exactly. And so
and
I
if
think
you can do it, maybe somebody else can do it.
if you can hack into that system and what's the encryption and all that sort of stuff. And I think that's where the major slippery slope is, where like technology in general in cars wasn't a problem until cars got connected to the internet. And I think that's where the major shift happened. Now, moving into the future, I could totally see just a big separation in regards to consumers of that there's going to be the people that recognize this potential threat, and they're just going to go buy used cars. Like you're talking about, you speak with your dollars. That's really the only way that you can voice your opinion in a capitalist society. This is me being my econ major of vote with your dollar. But essentially that's what's going to happen is, like us, people that recognize this are like, I'm just going to continue to buy a used car. Arguably, they're better cars than what's being produced nowadays, minus the technology of Bluetooth and whatever. And then there's going to be those people that are still willing to sell their souls to automotive manufacturers to sell their data because they just want the newest thing with the best gear and gadgets and whatever. And that means that automotive manufacturers are going to continue to build cars for those people. And they're going to continue to get further away from what we like as enthusiasts or those analog individuals that just want a good product. And there's just going to be this larger and larger separation. And I could definitely see society in a handful of years where new cars are just kind of viewed as junk to most of us. And there's going to be this great kind of like aftermarket repair community of like, let's just keep those old cars from the 2010s running and just completely forget about the new stuff. I could totally see that happening.
Imagine the sci-fi scenario in the future where we're like keeping these old robots alive from before the new robots came online that were going to like kill all humans. We just needed the simple robots from back in the day. And, as enthusiasts, sometimes that enthusiasm causes us to lead down paths of being a little pessimistic, but it's a lot more fun to be thinking about, maybe even with some caution, an optimistic future. So what's a potential solution here? Is there a manufacturer who's willing to kind of come to the fore, who's going to build a product to say, our differentiation as our vehicle, in addition to having a good quality car that's fun to drive and everything, is your privacy. And this car will not be connected to any third-party systems. We're not going to be feeding you information that you don't ask for. We're not going to be collecting information from this car. That'll be codified into the purchase contract of the vehicle. It can be proven out through documentation of the systems in a car. There are ways to do this. And if some manufacturer would be brave enough to come forward with this, they could charge a premium to those people who are enthusiasts like us who say, look, I just want an analog style car because I'm concerned with all this data collection and privacy and intrusiveness into my experience, but I want something that's going to work as well as modern cars in terms of reliability and efficiency. Can't you give me that? And they're going to say, well, we're not going to make all this money off of data and advertising off of you, so we've got to make it some other way. Okay, so charge me another 10 grand for this car.
Yeah.
Now would you be willing to do it? I think there's a potential for that. That's what I'm hopeful for, is some consortium or individual company to come forward and say bravely, we're not going to do it this way. We're going to find other ways to exist and grow and foster a manufacturing ecosystem around things that have this set of principles in place. And maybe it's not even just cars, but a company that's out there for the purpose of creating things that don't sell out their users, sell out their consumers, right? And I think there's a huge potential for this. It's just a matter of where the dollars go, whether that can ever be enabled, whether our law would back that up, or whether this company would be sort of held on the outside, not allowed to be licensed, not allowed to be given dealerships, not allowed to be approved by the DOT because there's some other incentive that we're not seeing here that they really want to have access to.
It's interesting that the future might be of no features is a feature, that the connectivity, not having it, is something that people might look out to. And I think we are seeing that shift kind of happen in our society, that people are more interested in analog and hard items, if that makes sense, of not too much of this engagement or interconnectivity with technology. If we just enjoy just a good, solid product.
Yeah, some of it's just nostalgia for things that are retro, but I believe there's really something fundamentally behind that. The fact that people are looking for film cameras and records and cassette tapes, it's because they're sick and tired of having some other company say, yeah, we know you sort of thought you bought this thing, but you didn't actually buy the license for it or the intellectual property. You just bought it through this one narrow channel of use, and we're going to tell you you can't use it in these other ways. I think that's just the world in which we find ourselves now, and we need to find a way past that or around that, or we're just destined to live with it.
I think it's been a fun deep dive into maybe the very realistic conspiratory mindset of how technology could be potentially ruining your relationship with your car, or potentially your car selling you out to privacy and information buyers.
Man, I just want to sell a car that's going to sell me out. I don't want to have anything to do with that. I don't want to touch that. But no, I think there's a really important point to be made here, and something we all need to pay really close attention to, not just for those of us who are car enthusiasts, but anybody who's out in the world buying a good or service from some company. What is the implicit or explicit contract you have with that company? What does that give you a right to or not give you a right to? And how is that changing underneath us because just people aren't paying close enough attention, or because policy and the law isn't keeping up with that? All these things are developments that we all have a stake in and a say in, and it's important to pay close attention. And we'll continue to address this topic as we learn more about it and as we see evolution in the market. And maybe there will be a company that comes forward and says, we're going to sell you a privacy-oriented car. And I'd love to see something like that occur and see a company like that be successful at it.
Well, this has been a great automotive PSA. Thanks for bringing up the topic, Todd.
Hey, thanks for an enthusiastic conversation as always.
Well, thanks for listening. This has been Cold Start.